The most feared man in Atlantic City spent every Christmas Eve staring at an empty chair, until a plus-size caterer with powdered sugar on her sleeve walked into his private dining room carrying pastries, bad luck, and a dead girl's locket. Julian Vane did not believe in Christmas miracles. He believed in contracts, locked doors, clean exits, and men who only stayed loyal when fear cost less than betrayal. In Atlantic City, people called him the architect because nothing moved through the casinos, docks, card rooms, private clubs, or late-night gambling houses unless Julian allowed it to move. Money passed through his city like blood through veins, and his hand stayed on the pulse. Men twice his age lowered their voices when they said his name. Politicians smiled at him in public and avoided his eyes in private. Police captains pretended not to know which streets belonged to him after midnight. And every year, when the rest of the city wrapped itself in lights and music and plastic kindness, Julian locked himself inside the private dining room above the Black Finch Casino and looked at one empty chair. No one asked about the chair, not his guards, not his managers, not the men who owed him enough money to lose sleep for the rest of their lives. The room had a table long enough for 20 people, but on Christmas Eve, Julian used only one end of it. Tea waited in a white porcelain cup, always untouched until it went cold. A single-place setting waited across from him, polished, perfect, and empty. There was no photograph on the table, no name card, no candle, only the chair angled slightly toward the window, as if someone small had once liked looking down at the snow falling over the boardwalk. Julian sat there in his black suit, still as a man carved from winter, and let the city celebrate without him. That year, the snow came early. It softened the sharp edges of the casino roofs and turned the boardwalk lights into blurred halos against the dark. Inside, the Blackfinch Christmas was loud enough to feel expensive. Gold garland looped around marble columns. A singer in a red velvet dress crooned beside the fountain bar. Dealers wore silver ties. Guests laughed too loudly because rich people often mistook volume for joy. Downstairs, champagne moved on trays. Upstairs, outside the private dining room, armed men stood so still they looked like part of the architecture. Julian heard none of it. Or maybe he heard all of it and hated it equally. He sat with his tea cooling beside his hand and watched the empty chair. His face gave away nothing. It almost never did. His dark hair was combed back with ruthless care. His jaw was clean-shaven. His black suit fit him like it had been built around thread itself. He was 36, but grief had aged him in strange ways, not in wrinkles, not in weakness. It had made him precise. It had frozen every soft thing before anyone could touch it. At exactly 7:43, his security chief opened the dining room door just enough to step inside. Marcus Bell had worked for Julian for 12 years and feared almost nothing except the look Julian gave men who interrupted Christmas Eve. "The catering delivery is late," Marcus said. Julian did not turn from the chair. Then they should learn time. They sent a replacement. Send it away. The kitchen already signed for it. Julian looked at him then. The room got colder without changing temperature. Marcus did not move, but his throat shifted once. "It is desserts," Marcus added, "for the downstairs party. Cannoli, tiramisu cups, some kind of almond cake. The staff says the delivery girl got sent to the wrong floor." Julian's eyes returned to the empty chair, then sent her to the right one. That should have been the end of it. In Julian's world, most problems ended because he decided they had. But fate, which had never respected his authority, was already coming down the hallway in snow boots, carrying a metal tray, muttering to herself about rich people and confusing elevators. Alara Vance was tired enough to fight a chandelier. Her curls had escaped the clip at the back of her head. Her green coat was missing one button. Powdered sugar dusted the front of her black dress, like she had lost a private argument with a bakery shelf. She was soft, round, and warm-looking in a way that made strangers assume she was gentle until she opened her mouth. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Her arms ached from carrying pastry boxes, and her patience had been left somewhere between the loading dock and the service elevator, with the brass buttons that made no sense. She had not planned to spend Christmas Eve in a casino, owned by a man whose name showed up in articles that used words like alleged, feared, empire, and untouchable. She had planned to make deliveries, collect payment, go home, split cheap takeout with her roommate, and maybe fall asleep before midnight with frosting under one fingernail. Her dessert business, Sugarlark, was barely staying alive. The rent was late. The mixer made a noise like a dying lawnmower. Her roommate Tessa had started using the phrase temporary financial adventure, which sounded nicer than, we are one disaster away from crying in a grocery aisle. So when a last-minute holiday order came in from the Black Finch, Alara took it. She did not ask why a casino needed 72 tiramisu cups at the last second. She had learned that questions did not pay invoices. The trouble had started before she even reached the casino. Her good winter coat had ripped near the pocket that morning, so she wore the thrift store coat she had bought 3 days earlier from a tiny charity shop near Ventnor Avenue. It was red wool, old but pretty, with deep pockets and a lining that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. She had found the hidden pocket by accident while looking for lip balm. Her fingers had slipped through a loose seam and touched velvet. Inside was a small black box. At first she thought she had found jewelry someone forgot. Then she opened it and saw the locket, silver, scorched along one edge, engraved with a tiny lark so fine she almost missed it. On the back were 2 initials, SV, carved in delicate letters that had survived whatever fire had kissed the metal. She should have turned it in. She meant to, but curiosity had always been one of Alara's worst habits, right after stress baking and buying coats from shops that smelled like old secrets. So she searched online during a break, expecting nothing. Instead, she found Sarah Vane. The articles were 20 years old. Most were archived, blurred, or hidden behind ugly news sites that looked like they had been built during the age of dial-up. The Vane family home had burned down 2 days before Christmas. Julian Vane, 16 at the time, survived because he had been away with his uncle. His mother died. His little sister, Sarah, died too. There were no surviving remains named in the cleaner articles, only words like presumed and identified through personal effects. In one photo, a young Sarah Vane stood beside a Christmas tree, smiling with one missing front tooth and wearing a silver locket shaped like an oval. The caption said, her father called her his little lark. Alara had stared at the image so long, Tessa finally asked if she had found a ghost. Maybe she had. Now the ghost was in her coat pocket, sitting inside the velvet box like a secret with teeth. Alara had told herself she would drop off the desserts, ask for someone responsible, hand over the box, and leave before anyone decided she had watched too many documentaries and needed fresh air. But the Black Finch was huge and full of people who answered questions with more questions. A kitchen runner pointed her to the elevator. The elevator opened on the wrong floor. A man with a headset waved her through without looking at the order slip. Another man told her private dining was straight ahead. And Alara, who had been awake since 4 baking almond cookies shaped like stars, walked through a pair of heavy doors into a room where silence had a pulse. She knew at once she had entered the wrong place, not because of the table, not because of the armed men, not even because the air felt richer up there, polished and controlled and smelling faintly of cedar, tea, and danger. She knew because the man at the far end of the table looked at her like people usually looked at loaded weapons. Alara stopped. Her tray did not. One tiramisu cup slid across the metal surface. She grabbed it. 2 cannoli rolled to the edge. She caught one with her wrist, the other with her stomach, and somehow bumped sideways into Julian Vane's shoulder, just as he stood. Powdered sugar exploded softly against his black suit. Every guard in the room went still. Alara looked down at the white smear across his jacket, then up at his face, then back at the jacket. Well, she said, because terror had apparently broken the polite part of her brain. At least now you look festive. No one breathed. Julian Vane looked at the sugar on his suit as if it had personally betrayed him. Then he looked at her. His eyes were dark, calm, and far too awake. Alara had seen eyes like that only in winter ocean water, the kind that looked still until it took someone under. "Who are you?" he asked. "The person who is definitely not supposed to be in this room." She swallowed. Alara. Dessert delivery. Possible elevator victim. Unclear at this time. A guard stepped forward. "Boss." Julian raised one hand without looking away from her. The guard stopped. Alara's heart was now trying to leave through her throat, but exhaustion had made her reckless. She held the tray tighter against herself. I can go. I would love to go. Leaving is currently my favorite dream. You walked into my private dining room. I was misdirected by a man with an earpiece and the emotional warmth of a parking meter. One of the younger guards made a sound that might have been a cough. Julian's gaze flicked toward him. The guard became a statue. Ilara closed her eyes for half a second. Sorry, that was nerves. I insult objects when I'm anxious. You are anxious? She looked at the armed men, the long table, the empty chair, and the powdered sugar on the suit of the most dangerous man in Atlantic City. No, I'm thriving. Something almost changed in Julian's face. Not a smile, not even close, but the edge of his mouth moved as if it remembered the idea and rejected it too late. Then his eyes dropped to her coat, more precisely, to the pocket where the velvet box pressed against the wool. Ilara noticed because women who spent years in rented kitchens and crowded buses learned to notice when men looked at them like they had already decided something. She shifted the tray. I have something that belongs to you, she said, before fear could drag the words back. Julian went very still. Nothing belongs to me by accident. This might. Marcus moved closer. Put the tray down. Ilara did, slowly, on the nearest sideboard. The desserts rattled softly. Her fingers felt clumsy as she reached into her coat. Every guard watched her hand. She had the sudden, awful thought that maybe pulling a velvet box out in front of armed men was how idiots died in casino dining rooms. It's not a weapon, she said. Julian's voice stayed quiet. Open your hand. She did. The box rested on her palm, worn black velvet, no larger than a deck of cards. Marcus looked at Julian. Julian did not blink. Where did you get that? Julian asked. A coat. A coat? A thrift store coat. This one. It had a hidden pocket in the lining. Ilara lifted her chin, trying to sound less frightened than she felt. I looked inside because I'm nosy and financially unstable. Then I researched it because the initials were on the back. I think it belonged to Sarah Vane. The empty chair seemed to grow louder. Marcus whispered something under his breath. Another guard crossed himself. Julian did neither. He only stared at the box, but his face changed in a way that scared Ilara more than anger would have. The cold mask did not break. It thinned. Under it was something raw enough that she wished she had never brought the thing into the room. Give it to me, Julian said. She stepped forward and held it out. His fingers brushed her palm when he took it. His hand was warm. She had not expected that. Men like him were supposed to feel like marble. Julian opened the box. The locket sat inside, silver and blackened at one edge, tiny lark catching the light. For a moment, Julian did not move at all. Then his hand shook, only once, barely, but everyone saw it. Ilara forgot to breathe. This was not the reaction of a criminal boss finding an old jewel. This was a man seeing a grave open. Julian touched the locket with one finger, not picking it up yet. His jaw tightened so hard it looked painful, his eyes fixed on the tiny bird. That burned, he said. His voice was low, almost empty. Ilara spoke softly. That's what the article said. It was buried with her. I'm sorry. He looked up then, and the grief in his face vanished so quickly it felt like watching a door slam shut. Who sent you? No one. Do not lie to me in this room. I'm not lying. Someone gave you that coat. I bought it from a thrift shop for $12 because the zipper on my other coat broke, and December has no mercy. Who paid you? No one paid me. Actually, several people are avoiding paying me, which is a sore topic, but no one paid me for this. Marcus moved again. Boss, this could be a setup. Ilara's stomach dropped. A setup? I came here with cannoli. Julian closed the box with a soft snap. Men have used stranger wrapping. Great. That is horrifying and probably true. He stepped closer. Ilara made herself stand still. He was taller than she had realized, broad without looking bulky, controlled in a way that made every movement feel chosen in advance. His gaze moved over her face, searching for cracks. You found the locket, he said. Researched my family. Came here on Christmas Eve, walked into my private room by mistake, and you expect me to believe this is kindness? No, Ilara said. I expect you to believe it is bad timing, curiosity, and a woman who thought a dead girl's brother might want back the only thing the fire didn't take. That landed. She saw it. A small shift behind his eyes. Not trust, not softness, but recognition, maybe. Or pain. Then the first gunshot cracked through the casino below. The sound tore the room apart. Julian moved before Alara understood what had happened. One set, he stood in front of her. The next, his hand closed around her arm and pulled her behind him as the windows shook from a burst of noise downstairs. Guests screamed. Music stopped mid-note. A guard shouted into his radio. Another slammed the dining room doors shut and locked them. Alara clutched Julian's sleeve without meaning to. Was that a gun? No, Julian said, drawing a pistol from beneath his jacket. That was several. Her mouth went dry. I preferred when I ruined your suit. Stay behind me. I was already planning to be behind all armed people. Marcus listened to his earpiece, face hard. Masked shooters on the casino floor. West entrance and kitchen access. They hit security cameras first. Julian's eyes sharpened. They knew the layout. Marcus glanced at Alara. She saw the look and anger flashed through her fear. Do not look at me like that. I get lost in grocery stores. Julian looked at her too, and for one terrible second, she saw suspicion return. The locket, the wrong room, the attack, all of it lining up into a shape she had not made. I didn't do this, she said. Another shot rang out, closer this time. A bullet struck the dining room door, punching through the wood. Alara screamed and ducked. Julian pushed her down behind the sideboard. Dessert cups shattered near her shoulder, cream splattering across the carpet like melted snow. The door shook under a hard impact. Marcus shouted orders. Guards took positions. Julian crouched beside Alara, his body between hers and the door. Listen to me, he said. When I tell you to move, you move. Very bossy for a man covered in powdered sugar. His eyes cut to her. She swallowed. Fear response. Sorry. A shadow passed beneath the door. Alara's gaze caught on something near the serving cart in the hallway, visible through the gap where the bullet had split the wood. A black shoe, white sock, dark pants. A waiter's tray tilted slightly at one side. She had seen that waiter earlier near the service elevator. He had carried champagne glasses then. Now his wrist looked wrong, held stiff against the underside of the tray. Alara grabbed Julian's sleeve. The waiter. What? The one outside. He has something under the tray. Julian did not question her. He looked once, then fired through the door at an angle so precise it seemed impossible. A man cried out. The tray crashed down. Something metallic skidded across the hallway floor. Marcus kicked the door open. Julian's men moved like shadows with weapons. The hallway erupted for 5 seconds, maybe 10. Alara pressed both hands over her ears and tried not to think. When the noise stopped, Julian looked back at her. His expression had changed. Not completely. Not enough to call trust. But enough. You noticed him, he said. He looked like every server who has ever hated carrying soup, except more murdery. You saved my life. Please don't make that sound like another problem. It is. Before she could answer, Marcus returned. We have to move. Main stairs are blocked. Service corridor is still open, but not for long. Julian held out his hand. Alara stared at it. Are you arresting me, kidnapping me, or helping me up? Yes. That is not an answer. It is the only one we have time for. She took his hand. He pulled her up with surprising care, as if he knew exactly how much strength to use and how much not to. The room smelled like sugar, smoke, and gunpowder. Her tray lay overturned. Cannoli cream streaked across a bullet mark in the wall. The empty chair remained untouched at the end of the table. Julian noticed her looking at it. For a moment, something passed through his face again. Then he tucked the velvet box inside his and guided her toward a hidden panel behind a wine cabinet. Secret tunnel? Alara asked. Service passage. Of course. Rich criminals never just have hallways. Quiet. I talk when I'm scared, I noticed. The panel opened into a narrow stairwell lit by red emergency bulbs. Julian went first, then Alara, then Marcus behind them. The air smelled damp and old, like concrete and electricity. Above them, the casino roared with panic. Below, The stairs curved into the bones of the building. Ilara's boot slipped on the metal steps. Julian caught her elbow without turning. Careful. I am being careful. My body and gravity are in a long-term disagreement. Settle it later. They hurried down. Somewhere behind them, a door slammed. Voices echoed. Julian stopped so suddenly Ilara nearly hit his back. He lifted one finger. Silence. Even Ilara obeyed. 2 men were waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Julian fired first. Ilara saw only flashes. Movement. Julian's body turning with terrifying calm. One man dropped his weapon. The other lunged. Marcus slammed him into the wall. Ilara grabbed the closest object, which happened to be a metal emergency flashlight, and held it like a sword. Julian glanced at her. Planning to blind someone? I'm open to options. Despite everything, his mouth almost moved again. Almost. They pushed deeper into the tunnel. Pipes ran overhead. The casino's polished music was gone now, replaced by distant alarms and the harsh buzz of emergency lights. Ilara's breath came too fast. Her thighs burned. The velvet box had been in Julian's pocket for only minutes, but it felt as if the locket had pulled the whole night into another world. Why would someone use me? She asked. Julian kept moving. Because you were believable. That is insulting. It is practical. A hired thief would raise alarms. A caterer with a thrift store coat would not. So I was chosen, because I look harmless. Yes, she hated that the word stung. I'm not harmless. I know. He said it without looking back, and somehow, that made it worse. They reached a security room hidden beneath the east wing of the casino. Marcus locked the door behind them while Julian crossed to a bank of monitors, most of which showed static. He removed the velvet box from his jacket and opened it again under the desk lamp. Ilara stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself. Now that they had stopped running, she started shaking. Not dramatically, just enough that she had to press her hands into her sleeves to hide it. Julian saw anyway. Of course he did. There is water in the cabinet, he said. I'm fine. You are shaking. I was recently shot near. It feels like a fair reaction. He opened the cabinet himself, took out a bottle, unscrewed the cap, and handed it to her. He did not crowd her. He did not touch her. He only waited until she took it. That small restraint unsettled her more than the gun in his hand had. Julian turned back to the locket. With a small knife from his pocket, he eased open the back. Inside was an old faded photograph of a little girl with dark curls and a missing tooth. Sarah, Ilara thought, and her chest tightened. Behind the photograph, something blinked once. Red. Marcus leaned in. Tracker. Julian's face went cold in a new way. Active? Marcus pulled a device from his pocket and scanned it. Yes, short-range pulse. Whoever placed it knows it moved. Julian stared at the tiny red light. Then he crushed the tracker beneath the heel of his shoe. The sound was small. The meaning was not. Ilara's voice came out softer than she meant. So I really was bait. Julian looked at her then. The suspicion was gone. In its place was something almost worse. Responsibility? Yes, he said. So was I. For the first time all night, Ilara saw the shape of the trap clearly. Someone knew about the locket. Someone knew what Sarah meant to him. Someone knew Christmas Eve would make the wound deeper. And someone had sent Ilara through the door, with sugar on her dress and death in her pocket. She took a slow breath. I still have the coat. Julian's eyes sharpened. At my apartment, she said. The one with the hidden pocket. I didn't bring it because this coat is warmer, and I didn't think tonight would become whatever this is. Marcus looked at Julian. If the tracker led them here, they may already know where she lives. Ilara's heart dropped. Tessa. Who? My roommate. Julian was already moving. Call her. Ilara pulled out her phone with fingers that suddenly felt too thick. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. On the third try, Tessa picked up, breathless and annoyed. Ellie, I swear, if you ask me to check the oven again, are you home? No, I'm downstairs getting coffee because the upstairs neighbor is doing tap dance aerobics again. Why? Ilara closed her eyes in relief, so sharp it almost hurt. Do not go back inside. What happened? Long story, very casino, very illegal. Please just stay in the coffee shop. A pause. Did you offend someone rich? Yes. Again? This time with an antique locket and possible gunfire. Alara. I know. Stay downstairs. I'm coming. She hung up and found Julian watching her. You are not going alone, he said. I assumed the armed crime prince was part of the package now. Do not call me that. Would your criminal majesty prefer something shorter? Marcus looked away, but not quickly enough. Julian stared at her for one long second. Then, impossibly, a quiet breath left him. It was not quite a laugh, not yet, but it was closer than the room deserved. Alara noticed. So did he. The almost laugh disappeared from his face, but something had shifted. A thread, thin, strange, dangerous. They had met less than an hour ago, and already she had seen him grieve, doubt her, protect her, believe her, and almost smile. That was too much intimacy for one Christmas Eve, especially with a man who could probably make people vanish for using expired parking meters in his territory. They left through a lower garage in a black SUV with tinted windows and no holiday music. Julian sat beside her in the back, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, but far enough that their shoulders did not touch. Outside, Atlantic City slid past in wet neon and snow. The boardwalk lights shimmered like a dream, trying to hide a threat. Alara watched them blur across the glass. After several minutes, Julian spoke without looking at her. Why did you bring it to me? I told you. Tell me again. She turned toward him. His face was half shadow, half passing light. Because if my sister had something left in the world, Alara said, I would want it back. Julian looked at her then, not as a suspect, not as a problem, not as bait, as if for one small and dangerous second she had become a person. My sister liked sweets, he said quietly. Alara's chest softened. What kind? Lemon cookies, the kind with powdered sugar. She glanced at his ruined jacket. That feels weirdly full circle. She would have laughed at this suit. Smart girl. Julian looked out the window again, but this time the silence did not feel empty. It felt like grief sitting between them, not asking to be fixed, only seen. When they reached Alara's building, 2 of Julian's men went in first. Tessa stood in the coffee shop below, wrapped in a scarf and holding a paper cup with both hands. Her eyes widened when she saw Julian. Alara, she whispered. Why does the terrifying casino man from the internet look like he personally hates weather? Long story, Alara said. Also, please don't Google people in front of them. Julian ignored that. Stay here with Marcus. Tessa blinked. Is he also from the internet? Marcus sighed. Unfortunately, Alara would have laughed if fear had not been crawling back up her throat. She led Julian upstairs. Her apartment door was closed, but the lock hung broken. The metal split cleanly near the frame. Her stomach turned cold. Julian gently moved her behind him before opening the door. The apartment had been searched. Not messy in a random way. Carefully, professionally. Couch cushions cut open, drawers emptied, flour spilled across the kitchen floor, dessert boxes overturned, Tessa's plants knocked from the windowsill. Alara's bedroom door stood open at the end of the hall, and inside, her closet light glowed. She pushed past Julian before he could stop her. The thrift store coat lay on the bed. Someone had sliced the lining open from collar to hem. Alara stared at it, anger rising hotter than fear. They had touched her room, her coat, her little struggling life, as if she were only a loose thread in someone else's old crime. Julian came up beside her. Do not touch anything. I already touched the cursed coat once. Seems like our standards have collapsed. Alara. The way he said her name stopped her. Low, firm, not cruel. She pulled her hand back. Julian examined the coat without moving it. Eyes narrowed. They were looking for something they did not find. How can you tell? If they had found it, they would not have left the coat on display. Alara leaned closer despite herself. The sliced lining sagged open. Near the bottom hem, half hidden under a fold of red wool, a small white tag showed through the torn seam. Not the brand label, not the thrift store sticker. A dry cleaning tag, yellowed with age, stapled into the inside seam where no normal customer would look. Alara bent over it, careful not to touch. The date was faded but readable, Her breath caught. "That can't be right," she said. Julian's voice turned very quiet. "What is it?" She looked up at him. The apartment, the ruined coat, the locket, the empty chair. All of it seemed to tilt around the tiny tag. "This coat was cleaned 12 years after your family fire." Julian did not move, but the room changed. The cold came back into his face. Sharper now, darker. But beneath it was something else. Not grief this time. Hope. Terrible hope. The kind that could save a man or destroy whatever was left of him. Alara looked at the torn red coat again, and for the first time, she understood that the locket had not come from a grave. It had come from someone who was still running. The dry cleaning tag was small enough to hide under Alara's thumb, but it made Julian Vane look as if the floor had opened beneath him. He did not touch it. He only stared at the faded numbers pressed into the yellowed paper, while the broken apartment door creaked behind them and snow tapped softly against the bedroom window. For a man who ruled casinos, docks, and underground rooms full of desperate money, he looked suddenly like a boy who had been handed back the first piece of a nightmare he had spent 20 years trying to bury. Alara watched his face and wished the tag had been anything else. A receipt, a mistake, a name, a joke from the universe, because the universe clearly had a cruel sense of timing. But the date did not change. The coat had been cleaned 12 years after the fire that supposedly took his mother and little sister. Someone had worn it. Someone had kept it. Someone had hidden a locket inside it and sent it into the world like a match dropped into dry wood. Julian's voice was calm when he finally spoke, but it was the kind of calm that made Alara more afraid than shouting would have. "Do you know where this cleaner is?" Alara leaned closer without touching the coat. "The tag has an address code, I think. Old ones use numbers instead of names sometimes. My grandmother used to save every receipt from every place she went, because she believed paper remembered what people tried to forget." Julian looked at her. Did it? She remembered everything anyway. So honestly, the paper was mostly backup. His eyes stayed on her for a second too long, like he was trying to decide whether her jokes were nerves or kindness. They were both. Alara had learned years ago that humor could act like a match in a dark room. It did not fix the dark. It only gave your hand something to do while you looked for the door. Marcus entered behind them, phone pressed to his ear. The cleaners who used that tag format were mostly family businesses. 2 still exist in Atlantic City. 1 closed 8 years ago. 1 is on Kentucky Avenue, owned by a man named Emil Rosso. Cash business, old records, no online system. Julian's eyes did not leave the coat. "We go now." Alara turned toward him. "Now. The people who searched your apartment did not find what they wanted. They will return, or move to the next clue. Right. Because why sleep when we can chase haunted laundry?" Julian looked at Marcus. "Send 2 men to stay with her roommate quietly." "Tessa is not going to like armed strangers watching her drink coffee," Alara said. "She will like dying less. That is a fair but very aggressive point." Julian moved toward the door, then stopped when he realized Alara had not followed. She stood in the middle of her ruined bedroom, staring at the flour dragged across her floor, the cut, open pillows, the smashed perfume bottle that had been a birthday gift from Tessa, and the bent metal rack where her work dresses had hung. It was not the value of the things that hurt. Most of them had not been valuable. That was exactly why it hurt. She owned so little, and someone had still decided they were allowed to tear through it. Julian saw the change in her face. "What do you need?" The question was simple, and maybe that was why it made her throat tighten. Most men in panic asked what happened. Who did this? What now? Julian asked what she needed, as if he believed the answer mattered before the next order did. Alara looked down at her hands. "My recipe notebook." Julian turned to Marcus. "Find it." "No." Alara stepped around a ripped box of winter clothes and crossed to the kitchen. "I know where it is." The notebook was hidden in the back of the flour bin, sealed in a plastic bag because Alara trusted neither burglars nor humidity. She pulled it free with shaking fingers. It was cheap, spiral-bound, and dusted white around the edges. Inside were cake recipes, customer notes, unpaid invoices, sketches for holiday menus, and one page titled, "Things to Bake When Life is Being Rude." She hugged it to her chest before she could stop herself. Julian watched from the doorway. His expression revealed almost nothing, but his gaze softened by a fraction. "That matters. It is my empire," she said, trying to make it light. His eyes moved around the ruined apartment. "Then we protect it." The words were quiet, not romantic, not dramatic, but Alara felt them settle somewhere deep. Men like Julian usually said mine and meant ownership, but when he said protect, he did not reach for her. He did not take the notebook. He did not decide where it belonged. He only stepped aside so she could carry it out herself. Downstairs, Tessa was waiting in the coffee shop with two armed men, pretending very badly to be casual customers. One of them was reading a menu upside down. Tessa looked at Alara, then at Julian, then at the men, then back at Alara. "I need you to know I am handling this with maturity, but only because I am too scared to scream in public." Alara hugged her quickly. "Stay with them until I call." "Absolutely not." "Who are they?" "Security. They look like rejected perfume models with ankle holsters." Julian's mouth barely shifted. Tessa pointed at him. "And you? Are you the reason our apartment looks like a raccoon got into witness protection?" "I am the reason she is still alive," Julian said. Tessa narrowed her eyes. "That is not the comforting sentence you think it is." Alara squeezed her hand. "Tess, please, I'll explain when I understand literally anything." Tessa's anger cracked into worry. "Ellie, I'm okay." "No, you're joking, which means you are somewhere between okay and actively losing your mind. Both can be true." Julian opened the SUV door. He did not tell Alara to hurry. He waited. That small patience made Tessa look at him differently, but not with trust. Tessa was too loyal for quick trust. "If she gets hurt," Tessa said to him, voice low, "I do not care how scary the internet says you are. I will haunt you while alive." Julian looked at her with perfect seriousness. "Fair." Alara almost smiled. "Good. Everyone is bonding." The drive to Kentucky Avenue took them away from the glow of the casino district and into older streets, where Christmas lights hung crooked over pawn shops, closed diners, and brick buildings with faded signs. Atlantic City looked different away from the tourists, less like a promise, more like a tired stage after the show ended, with glitter swept into the corners and secrets left under the seats. Alara sat beside Julian again, her recipe notebook on her lap, the torn coat sealed in a plastic evidence bag between them. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Alara said, "Sarah was how old?" Julian's jaw tightened. 6. Alara looked down. "I'm sorry. People say that when they don't know what else to offer." "Yes," she said softly. "But sometimes it is still true." He turned his head slightly. The passing lights crossed his face in gold and shadow. She hated being called little. Of course she did. She wanted to sit at the adult table. She thought children's tables were insulting. I respect that. She used to steal lemon cookies before dinner and hide them in piano benches. His voice changed as he said it. Not enough for anyone careless to notice, but Alara noticed everything when she was scared. My mother pretended not to know. "Did you tell on her?" "No." "Good brother. I charged her 1 cookie for silence." Alara laughed before she could help it. The sound surprised them both. It was too warm for the car, too normal for the night. Julian looked out the window quickly, as if he did not want to be caught near something gentle. The cleaner was still open, though the sign in the window said it had closed an hour earlier. A yellow lamp glowed behind old glass. Steam fogged the windows. The bell over the door gave a tired little ring when Marcus pushed inside first, followed by Julian and Alara. The place smelled like starch, dust, warm fabric, and time. Plastic-covered suits hung in rows behind the counter. A radio played soft Christmas music somewhere in the back. An old man appeared from behind a curtain, wiping his hands on a towel. He had white hair, heavy glasses, and the cautious posture of someone who had survived long enough to recognize danger before it introduced itself. "We're closed," he said. Julian placed the dry cleaning tag on the counter. The man's face changed. It was fast, but not fast enough. Julian noticed. "Emil Rosso." The old man swallowed. "I don't want trouble." "Then answer carefully." Alara stepped forward before Julian could make the air any colder. "Mr. Rosso, please. We're trying to find the woman who owned this coat." Emil's gaze shifted to her. Some of the fear softened, maybe because she was still wearing sugar on her sleeve and holding a battered notebook against her stomach like a shield. "That coat should have been gone. It was donated," Alara said. "I bought it. Then you should burn it." Julian's hand flattened on the counter. "Who brought it here?" Emil took a slow breath. She called herself Mrs. Lark. Alara looked at Julian. His face had gone still again. "That was not her name," Emil said. "I knew that. But in this city, people are allowed fake names if they pay cash and don't bleed on the clothes." "How many times did she come here?" Julian asked. "For years, not often. Maybe twice a year. Always in winter. Always with that red coat or black dresses. Good fabrics. Old money fabrics." Emil glanced toward the windows as if expecting a face to appear there. "She wore gloves. Always gloves, even inside." "What did she look like?" Alara asked. Emil rubbed a hand over his mouth. "Elegant, thin, dark hair going silver near the front. She moved like someone who had been taught manners by people who punished mistakes. She did not smile much, but she thanked me every time." Julian's voice was barely above a whisper. "Was she alone?" "No." The word fell hard. "A man came with her," Emil said. "Big. Quiet. Not one of yours?" Julian's eyes sharpened. "Describe him." "He had a spiderweb tattoo on his hand." "Here." Emil touched the skin between his thumb and forefinger. Black lines, all the way across the knuckles. I remember because he never took off his gloves. Except once. He scared me worse than most, and I have cleaned suits for men who hid knives in their socks." Marcus looked at Julian. "Dante has a man named Silas Crane, spiderweb tattoo, enforcer from the old cruise." Julian did not react, but the name Dante hit the room like a locked door opening. Alara had heard that name online too. Dante Vane, Julian's uncle, the man who raised him after the fire. The respectable older criminal with silver hair and charity donations, always described as Julian's mentor, advisor, family, the only Vane who had stayed. Julian leaned closer. "When did she stop coming?" Emil's eyes lowered. 3 months ago." "Why?" "I don't know." "Do better." The old man flinched. Alara put one hand on the counter. "Please." Anything she said could matter. Emil looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached below the counter and unlocked a drawer. From inside he took out a small envelope, yellow with age, but sealed carefully. He placed it between them. "She left this the last time," he said. "Told me if anyone came asking about the coat, and if that person had his eyes, I should give it to him." Julian stared at the envelope, but did not take it. Alara understood before Marcus did. His eyes, Sarah's, his mother's, his own. Maybe all of them. She touched Julian's sleeve lightly. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. She pulled back at once, but he did not seem angry. He opened the envelope. Inside was one piece of paper. The handwriting was thin and slanted. "Tell Julian the Lark was never buried." The room went quiet. Julian read it once, then again. His hand tightened around the paper so slowly that Alara thought it might tear. "She's alive," Alara whispered. Emil made the sign of the cross. "God forgive us." Julian turned to him. "Where did she go?" "I don't know." Julian's stare darkened. Emil lifted both hands. "I swear. But the last time, she looked ill, weak. The man with the tattoo had to help her out. There was a car waiting. Black sedan, medical plates." Marcus was already on his phone. "There are 4 private care facilities within 30 miles that use medical transport plates and accept cash transfers through shell companies." Julian folded the note with impossible care. "Find which one Dante funds." Marcus walked outside to make the call. Alara watched Julian. He had gone quiet in a way that did not feel empty. It felt crowded with ghosts. She wanted to say something useful, but useful words were rare in moments like that. So she said the true thing. She tried to get the message to you. Julian did not look at her. For 20 years? Maybe she couldn't before, or maybe she chose not to. Alara's chest tightened at the bitterness in his voice. "You don't know that. I know what survival costs." "So do I," she said, softer now. That made him look at her. For the first time since the casino, the space between them felt less like suspicion and more like recognition. Not the same wounds, not the same life, but the same knowledge that pain could turn people into locked rooms. Marcus came back in. His face told them before he spoke. St. Orleans, private neurological care facility outside Egg Harbor, funded through Halcyon Medical Holdings. Halcyon is owned by a Vane family shell. Julian's eyes turned flat. Dante. Marcus nodded, and the facility had a woman listed under the name Mara Bell. Long-term resident. No public family contact. Payments approved by Dante's office. Alara felt cold all over. Mara. Sarah's mother was Marina, right? Julian did not answer. He was already walking toward the door. St. Orleans sat behind iron gates and tall pine trees. Too pretty to feel honest. Snow rested on the roof like a clean lie. Warm lights glowed in every window. A wreath hung on the front door. It looked peaceful in the way. Expensive places often looked full because someone had paid to keep suffering quiet. Julian's men took the gatehouse without firing a shot. Money, fear, and Marcus's low voice did what weapons did not need to do. Inside, the building smelled of lemon polish and medicine. A nurse at the front desk stood when Julian entered, then froze when she recognized him. Julian did not threaten her. He only placed a photograph of his mother on the desk. The old news article image was grainy, but Marina Vane's face was clear enough. "Where is she?" he asked. The nurse's lips parted. "I can't." Julian's voice dropped. "Do not make me ask twice on Christmas Eve." Alara stepped beside him. "If she's been kept here against her will, you're not protecting a patient. You're protecting whoever trapped her." The nurse's eyes filled with fear. She looked down the hall. "Room 312. But she's weak, and the man who pays said no visitors. Ever." Julian's expression did not change, but Alara saw the blow land. No visitors, ever. 20 years of being alive and unreachable, only miles from the city where her son ruled everything except the truth. They rode the elevator in silence. Alara stood close enough to Julian to feel the storm coming off him. His hands were loose at his sides, but not relaxed. Marcus watched the hallway through the elevator doors like he expected death to step in politely on the 3rd floor. Room 312 was at the end of a quiet corridor. A small Christmas tree sat on a table outside, decorated with paper angels, made by patients who probably did not know the building had been hiding a woman from her own son. Julian stopped at the door. For one heartbeat, he looked afraid. Alara saw it and looked away quickly, giving him the privacy of not being witnessed. Then he opened the door. The woman in the bed was asleep. Or almost asleep. She was thin, gray-haired, and older than the photographs, but the bones of her face were the same, elegant even in illness. A red scarf lay folded across the chair beside her. Her hands rested on the blanket, fingers curled slightly inward. On her left wrist was a burn scar that disappeared under her sleeve. Julian stood in the doorway like he had forgotten how to enter a room. The woman opened her eyes. For a moment, she only stared. Then her lips trembled. "Jules," she whispered. The sound that left Julian was not a word. It was softer and more broken than anything Alara had imagined could come from him. He crossed the room, not like a Mafia-Boss, not like the architect of Atlantic City, but like a son who had been 16 for 20 years and had finally found the room where time had been hiding. He knelt beside the bed. His mother lifted a shaking hand to his face. Julian closed his eyes when she touched him. Alara turned away. Some grief was too sacred for strangers, even strangers carrying the clue that opened the door. But Marina Vane was looking past him now, toward Alara. "You found the coat," she whispered. Alara nodded. "I found the locket." Marina's eyes filled. "Sarah." Julian's head lifted. "Where is she?" The question came out rough. Marina's hand trembled against his cheek. "Alive." Julian stopped breathing. "She was alive after the fire," Marina whispered. "I heard her crying. Dante said he would take her somewhere safe. He said you were safe too. He said if I made noise, if I tried to find you, both my children would disappear for real." Julian's face went pale beneath the hard lines of it. "Dante did this." Marina closed her eyes. A tear slipped sideways into her hair. "Your father was going to remove him from the business. Dante owed money, too much money, to men who do not accept apologies. He wanted control before your father could cut him out. The fire was supposed to erase the old family and leave him as guardian to the heir. Julian stood so fast the chair scraped back. Marcus took one step closer, ready for whatever his boss might destroy. Ilara's heart beat hard in her ears. Marina reached weakly toward the bedside drawer. Journal. Ilara moved first. She opened the drawer and found a leather book wrapped in cloth. The pages smelled old and dry, ink pressed deep into them by a woman who had needed proof more than comfort. Julian took it, but his mother kept her hand over his for 1 second. "I wrote everything," she said. "Names, dates, accounts, the men Dante paid, the doctor who signed my records, the priest who lied about the funeral. I wrote it because one day I needed you to know I did not leave you." Julian's throat moved. "Why didn't you send it?" "I tried." Her eyes went to the red scarf. Silas watched everything, every call, every letter. Emile was the only risk I could take. I had to wait until they thought I was too sick to matter. Ilara looked at the woman in the bed, at the red scarf, at the trembling hands, and felt a soft kind of horror open inside her. Marina Vane had not been buried. She had been stored, hidden in a bright room with clean sheets and locked information, kept alive only because dead women left no leverage, and living ones could still be used. Julian opened the journal. His eyes moved across the pages, faster at first, then slower as the truth became too heavy to skim. Ilara saw names she did not know. Dante, Silas, Halcyon, Moretti, payments, fire, transfer, girl. Julian turned one page and stopped. His face changed again. Not grief, not shock, rage. "What is it?" Ilara asked carefully. Julian's voice was almost silent. Sarah was given to the Morettis. Marcus swore under his breath. Marina began to cry. A peace offering. Dante told them she was valuable because Vane blood could settle old claims. They raised her under another name until she was old enough to marry Luca Moretti. Ilara felt sick. She was a child. "Yes," Marina whispered, "and Dante made monsters call it peace." Julian closed the journal, but his hand stayed on top of it. He looked toward the window, where snow drifted past the glass, soft and innocent and completely unbothered by what people did beneath it. "I will kill him," Julian said. No one asked who. There were too many possible answers, and all of them were true. Marina gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "If you go in rage, Dante wins again. He made you from grief, Jules. Do not let him aim you one more time." The sentence struck him like a slap. Ilara saw it. So did Marcus. Julian pulled his hand free, but not harshly. "He has my sister." "And he wants your war," Marina said. "He wants you blind. He wants the city burning so he can sell the ashes." Julian looked at the journal, then at his mother, then at Ilara. She did not know why his gaze landed on her, but it did. Maybe because she had nothing to do with mafia rules. Maybe because she had already noticed a waiter with a gun and a tag and a coatum. Maybe because she was the one person in the room who had not spent years obeying the shape of his world. Ilara swallowed the Moretti gala. Marcus turned. "What?" She hugged her notebook tighter. "There's a Christmas gala tomorrow night. I saw it on the catering board last week. The Moretti estate ordered a dessert star from Belladonna Events. Sugarlark was too small to bid for it, which is rude, because my lemon cream puffs could emotionally improve criminals. But that is not the point." Julian's eyes sharpened. "Sarah will be there. If she is married to Luca Moretti and Dante is making a deal, then maybe. Big family gala. Public enough to pretend everything is normal. Private enough to hide the truth in the upstairs rooms." Marcus looked at Julian. "It could work." "No," Julian said. "It is too dangerous for her." Ilara blinked. For who? Julian's gaze stayed on Marcus. "Ilara goes nowhere near the Moretti estate." Ilara laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the audacity arrived dressed as concern. "Excuse me." Julian looked at her. "You have done enough. I was shot at. Yes, my apartment was broken into. Yes, your uncle's creepy spiderweb man knows I exist. Yes. And your solution is to send me home with a cookie and a trauma souvenir?" His jaw tightened. My solution is to keep you alive, by deciding my part in this is over without asking me." The room went very still. Julian stared at her. Marina watched them from the bed with tired, knowing eyes. Marcus suddenly became fascinated by the hallway. Ilara stepped closer, not enough to threaten him, because that would have been stupid, but enough to make him listen. "You said someone chose me because I looked harmless. That is exactly why I can get inside. You walk into that gala, and every man with a gun starts sweating. I walk in with pastry boxes, and people ask me where the forks are." Julian's voice turned low. "This is not your fight. It became my fight when somebody used my coat, broke into my home, and tried to kill me before I got paid for the cannoli. This is not a joke." "No," she said softly, "it is not. Sarah is alive. Your mother survived. Dante has had 20 years to build lies around powerful men who all think they are the smartest person in the room. You do not need another powerful man charging through a front door. You need someone they will overlook." Julian's eyes moved over her face. "And you think I can let you risk your life because you are useful? I think you can respect me enough to let me choose what I risk it for." The words stayed in the room. For a moment, Ilara thought he would argue. He looked like a man built from arguments no one survived, but his mother's warning still hung between them. Dante had shaped him through grief. Power had taught him to confuse protection with command, and Ilara, tired, frightened, soft-bodied, sharp-tongued, powdered with sugar and stubbornness, stood in front of him, refusing to become another locked door in his life. Julian looked away first. That felt more intimate than if he had touched her. "We plan," he said. Ilara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Good. I love plans. I ignore many of them, but I love having them," Marcus muttered, comforting. Julian turned back to his mother. The rage had not left him. It had only been placed behind glass for the moment. "I will bring Sarah home." Marina's eyes filled again. "Bring yourself home, too." Julian did not answer, but his hand closed carefully around the journal. Outside St. Orleans, snow was still falling. It covered the black cars, the pine branches, the iron gate, the footprints of men who had arrived carrying guns and left carrying a story that could tear a family empire apart. Ilara stood beside Julian near the SUV, while Marcus arranged Marina's safe transfer to a vein-protected medical suite. For a few seconds, it was only the two of them and the quiet white night. Julian looked at her coat, then at her face. "You should be afraid." "I am. You do not act afraid. I am fat, self-employed, and behind on rent. I have acted brave in front of scarier things than death, like bank apps." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not freely, but enough that it broke through the cold around him and disappeared into the falling snow before either of them could pretend it had not happened. Ilara stared. "Oh my God, you do laugh." His expression closed at once. No, that was absolutely a laugh. It was a reaction to stress. Very convenient, criminally vague. "Get in the car, Ilara." She smiled, despite the fear pressing behind her ribs. "Yes, your criminal majesty." Julian opened the door for her, but before she stepped in, he caught her wrist gently. Not hard, not ownership, just enough to stop her if she wanted to stop. She looked down at his hand. He released her immediately. "I will not command you," he said quietly, "but if you come with me tomorrow, you follow the plan. If anything changes, you run." Ilara studied him. In the casino, he had looked like a myth made of money and blood. In her apartment, he had looked like judgment. In his mother's hospital room, he had looked like a son trying not to break. Now, under the snow, he looked like a man standing at the edge of everything he had been told was true. "I don't run well in formal shoes," she said, "but I'll try." His eyes softened by the smallest amount. "Wear comfortable ones." That might be the most romantic thing a dangerous man has ever said to me. Do not make it romantic. Too late. Footwear consideration is basically poetry. He shook his head once, but the ghost of the laugh was still there, hiding at the corner of his mouth. They drove back toward Atlantic City with Marina's journal locked in Julian's hand, and the future waiting like a loaded room. Somewhere across the city, Sarah Vane was alive beneath another family's roof, maybe wearing jewels chosen by people who owned her name, maybe smiling for guests who had no idea they were looking at a woman stolen from a fire. Somewhere, Dante Vane was preparing to divide an empire he had built on ashes, and beside Julian, Ilara watched the casino lights rise through the snow and understood that Christmas had not brought a miracle to the Black Finch. It had brought a map, and every line on it led to war. The map led to war, but Ilara Vance learned before sunrise that war looked very different when powerful men were trying to make it elegant. It did not begin with gunfire. It began with pressed shirts, quiet phone calls, black cars moving through snowy streets, and Julian Vane standing in the private office above the Black Finch with his mother's journal open on the desk and murder sitting patiently behind his eyes. The casino below had been closed to guests after the attack, but the building still breathed like a wounded animal. Security teams moved through the halls. Broken glass was swept from the carpet. Bullet holes were covered with temporary panels. Somewhere downstairs, a tired pastry chef was probably still wondering why half the holiday dessert table looked like it had been through a small, sugary apocalypse. Ilara stood near the window in one of Julian's borrowed coats, her own red thrift store coat folded in evidence plastic on the table, and watched the Atlantic City lights blink through the snow. Everything outside looked calm from this height. That felt rude somehow. The world should have looked cracked open. The sky should have been dramatic. The ocean should have done something gothic and useful. Instead, neon kept glowing, traffic kept moving, and Christmas morning arrived like people had not been shot at over a dead girl's locket. Julian had not slept. Ilara knew because she had not slept either, and every time she looked over, he was still there, reading the same pages as if the ink might change if he stared hard enough. Marina Vane had been moved before dawn to a private medical suite, guarded by men Julian trusted more than priests. She was weak, but alive. Alive. The word still felt too large for the room. Sarah was alive too, somewhere inside the Moretti world, married to Luca Moretti, shown at parties, hidden in plain sight like a jewel in a locked case. Dante Vane had stolen a family, burned a house, raised Julian on a lie, and then sat beside him for 20 years, pretending to be the only person who had stayed. Ilara did not know how a man survived learning something like that without becoming fire. Julian closed the journal at last. The sound was soft, but every man in the office turned toward him. "Dante will be at the gala tonight," Marcus said. Julian's face did not change. "He will expect me to come angry. He knows you found the facility by now." "Good." Ilara looked at him. "Good." Julian turned his eyes to her. They were tired, but not uncertain. If he knows, he will rush the deal. Rushed men make mistakes. Comforting. I love when villains are under deadline pressure. Marcus almost smiled, then remembered where he was and stopped. On the desk, a printed layout of the Moretti estate stretched beneath Julian's hand. Ilara had expected some terrifying fortress on a cliff. Instead, the Moretti house looked like a wedding cake with security cameras. White stone, huge windows, a ballroom, a greenhouse, 2 kitchens, 3 service entrances, a long drive lined with winter trees. It was the kind of place rich families used to pretend their violence came with manners. "The dessert staff enters through the south kitchen at 6, Marcus said. "Belladonna Events has 22 names confirmed. We can place Ilara on the substitute list. A server canceled this morning." Ilara lifted one finger. "Just to be clear, I am deeply offended by how easy it is to infiltrate high society with pastry." Julian looked at Marcus. "She will have 2 of our people inside." "No," Ilara said. Julian turned slowly. "No? If I arrive with 2 men who look like they have opinions about silencers, I am no longer invisible. They can pose as staff. Marcus looks like he irons his socks and knows 17 ways to break a wrist. No one is believing he is there to refill cream puffs." Marcus glanced down at his suit, mildly insulted. Julian's jaw tightened. "You are not going in alone. I won't be alone. I'll be surrounded by caterers, drunk criminals, and rich women pretending they don't want a second dessert. That is not protection. No, that is camouflage." Ilara stepped closer to the desk and tapped the kitchen entrance on the map. "You said Dante expects you angry. He also expects you to use the tools he understands." Guns. Men. Threats. If I go in looking like me, he sees nothing. That is the entire advantage. Julian's eyes moved over her face. Looking like you. She heard the danger in the softness of his voice. Not danger toward her. Danger toward every person who had ever made her say that phrase as if it required explanation. Ilara folded her arms. Fat woman carrying dessert trays. People see the tray first, the body second, and the brain almost never. It's annoying, but tonight, it is useful. Julian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I see your brain. Her mouth opened, then closed. That was unfair. He could not say something like that in the middle of a war plan while looking like grief in a black shirt. It made her forget 3 of the sarcastic things she had been preparing. She looked away first. Good, then use it. His expression softened by 1 quiet degree. I intend to. By evening, Ilara wore black pants, a white catering shirt, comfortable shoes Julian had quietly ordered, and she had loudly complained about until she realized they fit perfectly, and her hair pinned back with 2 cheap clips from her purse. She had refused the pearl earrings someone from Julian's staff offered, because no dessert server making hourly pay wore pearls to carry mousse. She kept 1 small earpiece hidden under her curls. Marcus would be on the line. Julian would be outside the estate with his men waiting for her signal. The plan was simple, which meant it had many ways to go wrong. Ilara would enter with the desert staff, find Sarah, confirm her willingness to leave, and guide her to the greenhouse service hall, where Julian's men could extract them without turning the ballroom into a battlefield. Dante's meeting with the Morettis would be recorded if possible. The journal was enough to ruin him legally in several ways, but in Julian's world, legal ruin was only one kind of death. The real goal was Sarah. Everything else could burn later. Before Ilara left, Julian met her in the private dining room. The empty chair was still there. The table had been cleaned, the shattered desserts removed, the bullet marks covered. But the room remembered. Ilara felt it when she stepped inside. Julian stood by the window holding the scorched silver locket. She wore this in every photograph, he said. Ilara came to stand beside him. She might remember it. She might hate me. The words were so quiet Ilara almost missed them. She looked at his profile. For what? For not finding her. You were 16. I became powerful enough to find anyone. But you were looking in a world Dante built for you. He chose the roads. He labeled the doors. He handed you a map with the truth erased. Julian's fingers closed around the locket. You make excuses generously. No, I make cannoli generously. This is different. He looked at her, and this time the almost smile came easier. Not happy, but real enough to ache. I do not know what happens tonight, he said. That is usually true of nights involving me. Ilara. The sound of her name stopped the joke in her throat. Julian turned fully toward her. If something goes wrong, you leave. You do not wait for me. You keep saying sweet things in the least romantic way possible. I mean it. I know. She held his gaze. But if I find your sister, I am not leaving without her. His face tightened. You barely know me. I know enough. No. You know the worst night of my life, badly explained. I know you were handed proof that your whole family was stolen from you, and you still asked me what I needed in my wrecked apartment. I know you pulled me behind you when bullets came through the door, even though you thought I might be part of the trap. I know you let your mother tell you not to become the weapon Dante designed. I know you are terrifying and dramatic, and badly in need of emotional supervision. She took a breath. I know enough for tonight. Julian stared at her like no one had ever spoken to him that way and lived. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a small black phone. One button, he said. Press it and every man I have comes for you. Ilara took it. Every man? That sounds expensive. It is. Do they invoice separately or is this more of a package situation? Ilara, sorry. Thank you. Their fingers brushed. Neither of them moved for one heartbeat too long. Then Julian released her. The Moretti estate glittered like a Christmas card designed by someone with secrets in the basement. White lights covered the trees. Gold wreaths hung from black iron gates. Music drifted into the cold air as Ilara arrived with the Belladonna catering van, carrying 2 boxes of lemon cream puffs and 1 terrified heartbeat. The kitchen was chaos in the way expensive parties always made kitchens chaos. Steam, silver trays, chefs whisper shouting, staff fixing collars, a manager named Andrea giving orders, with the dead-eyed calm of someone who had not sat down since Thanksgiving. No one looked twice at Alara. She carried desserts that made her useful and invisible, exactly as promised. Through her earpiece, Marcus spoke softly. "You're inside, unless this is a very aggressive bakery," Alara murmured. "Focus." "I am focused. I can be afraid and charming at the same time." She moved with the dessert staff into the ballroom. It was stunning in a cold, tasteless way. Crystal chandeliers, tall windows, red roses everywhere, even though it was Christmas, and roses felt like a threat in formal wear. Men in dark suits stood in clusters. Women in silk gowns laughed with their mouths and watched with their eyes. At the center of the room, Dante Vane lifted a glass of champagne and smiled like a man who had never once been haunted by the dead. Alara recognized him from photographs. Silver hair, handsome in the old expensive way. Kind face if you were foolish. Cruel mouth if you were paying attention. Luca Moretti stood near him, broad, polished, and bored. There were men who looked dangerous because they wanted people to know it. Luca looked dangerous because he found other people's convenient. Then Alara saw the woman beside him. Sarah Vane was alive. She was taller than Alara expected, elegant, thin, dressed in deep blue satin, dark hair swept back from a pale face. She looked nothing like the missing-toothed child in the old photograph, and exactly like her at the time. It was in the eyes, large, dark, watchful. A small diamond pendant rested against her throat, but no locket. Her smile was perfect and empty. She stood beside Luca as if she had been placed there. Alara's hand tightened around the dessert tray. "Visual on Sarah," she whispered. Marcus was silent for 1 second. Then, lower, Julian heard. Alara did not ask what Julian did with that information. She could imagine him outside in the snow, becoming very still. Getting near Sarah took 20 minutes, and most of Alara's ability to pretend she cared about dessert placement. She moved through guests with cream puffs and tiny chocolate cakes. People took them without looking at her face. One woman asked if the lemon was organic. A man with a gold watch touched Alara's elbow to stop her, and then spoke to her chest instead of her eyes. She smiled because tonight's survival required customer service, and customer service was just theater with worse shoes. Sarah finally stepped away from Luca near the side hall, one hand pressed lightly to her temple. Alara followed with the tray. "Lemon cream puff?" Sarah barely glanced at her. "No, thank you. It was your favorite once." Sarah froze. Alara's heart kicked. Sarah turned slowly. "What did you say?" Alara kept her smile soft and server bright for anyone watching. "Sorry?" "I said they're very light, almost like little clouds. People used to steal them before dinner sometimes." Sarah's face drained of color. Luca's voice came from behind them. "Is there a problem?" Alara turned with the tray. "Not unless you hate lemons, sir, which would be tragic but legally allowed." Luca looked her over once, dismissed her, and focused on Sarah. "Come back to the room." Sarah's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "I need a moment. You have had one." Alara saw it then. The tiny flinch Sarah tried to hide. Not fear of being hit in front of people. Fear of consequence later. Alara knew enough about that kind of fear to feel it in her own body. She tilted the tray. One cream puff rolled directly off the edge and landed cream side down on Luca Moretti's polished shoe. Silence opened around them. Alara gasped with the sincerity of an actress who deserved awards. "Oh my God. I am so sorry. I swear that pastry had personal ambition." Luca stared at his shoe. 2 guests turned. A waiter hurried over. Sarah stepped back, just enough. Alara lowered herself with a napkin before Luca could fully decide whether to be angry. "I can fix it." "Mostly. Emotionally, no. But visually, maybe." "Get away from me," Luca snapped. "Absolutely." She backed away. But as she passed Sarah, she whispered, "Greenhouse Hall, 5 minutes. Julian has the locket." Sarah's glass slipped from her hand. It shattered. This time, everyone looked. Dante turned from across the ballroom. His smile faded by half an inch. Alara kept walking, every nerve screaming. "I think Dante noticed," she murmured. Marcus's voice sharpened. Moved to service corridor. I need Sarah. You may have been made. Story of my life. She slipped through the kitchen, grabbed an empty tray, and circled toward the greenhouse hall. Her earpiece crackled once, then twice. For a second, Marcus disappeared behind static. Ilara tapped it, heart rising. Ilara, Marcus said. Silas Crane is inside. The spiderweb man. Of course he was. Ilara moved faster. The greenhouse was a long glass room filled with winter citrus trees, white flowers, and the warm, wet smell of soil. Outside, snow streaked the dark panes. For one beautiful second, it was empty. Then Sarah appeared from the opposite doorway, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her chest. Ilara set the tray down. Sarah? The woman flinched at the name as if it hurt. No one calls me that, she whispered. Julian does. Sarah's eyes filled instantly, but she shook her head. No, Dante said. Julian knew. He said Julian agreed after the fire. He said I was safer where I was. He said Julian became his son and forgot me. Ilara felt anger climb up her spine. Dante lied. Sarah laughed once, small and broken. Dante breathes lies. Ilara reached into her pocket and pulled out the scorched locket. Julian had given it to her before she left, though his hand had hated letting it go. Sarah stared at it. The world seemed to narrow to that tiny silver bird. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. My lark. Your mother kept you alive in her journal, Ilara said softly. She is alive too. Sarah made a sound like air leaving a wound. Mama? Yes. Sarah covered her mouth. For a moment, all the elegance cracked. Under the diamonds and blue satin was a stolen girl who had waited 20 years for someone to say the dead were not dead, and the lies were not home. Then a slow clap came from the doorway. Dante Vane stepped into the greenhouse. Silas Crane stood behind him, huge and blank-faced, a black spiderweb tattoo crawling across his right hand. Well, Dante said gently, this is disappointing. Sarah went still in the old practiced way. Ilara hated it. Dante looked at her with mild curiosity. You must be the caterer. Ilara picked up the empty tray. And you must be the uncle. No one should invite to anything. His smile thinned. Julian always did collect strays. She is not a stray, Sarah said. Dante looked at her then. Something cruel moved behind his eyes. Careful, my dear. You have forgotten how fragile your comforts are. Sarah's face paled, but she did not step back. Ilara's thumb found the black phone in her pocket. She pressed the button. Dante saw the movement. Silas, the big man lunged. Ilara swung the tray with every ounce of fear, fury, and catering experience she had. It hit Silas in the face with a loud metallic crack. He staggered, more surprised than hurt. Ilara grabbed Sarah's hand and ran. They made it 3 steps before the greenhouse doors burst open. Julian came through, like the night had made him, and sent him personally. He did not shout. He did not need to. The room changed around him. Men entered behind him. Moretti guards appeared from the opposite hall. Guns lifted. Women screamed in the ballroom beyond the glass. Music stopped. Dante sighed, as if Julian had arrived late to dinner. There he is. Julian's eyes moved once to Sarah. Everything in him broke and held at the same time. Sarah stared at him. Jules? Julian's face changed so completely that Ilara's chest hurt. The cold boss vanished. The feared architect disappeared. For 1 second, there was only a brother looking at his little sister across 20 stolen years. Sarah, he said. She took 1 step toward him. Silas grabbed Ilara from behind. His arm locked around her throat, and the room snapped back into danger. Julian raised his gun. Silas pulled Ilara against him, using her body as a shield. The pressure at her neck made stars burst at the edges of her vision. Dante looked almost pleased. Love has made you predictable. Julian did not move. His eyes were fixed on Ilara now, and she saw the terror he would never admit to anyone else. Dante walked closer, hands folded in front of him. Your father was predictable too. He believed family made a man honorable. Your mother believed truth mattered. Sarah believed rescue was coming. And now you have brought a desert girl into a blood feud because she made you laugh. Ilara wheezed. I am very funny. Silas tightened his arm. Julian's eyes went black. Dante smiled. There, that is the boy I raised. Rage first, thought second. I point. You burn. I wound. You become useful. Did you think your empire was yours, Julian? I built you from grief. Every enemy you killed, every deal you made, every street you took, you did because I left a hole in you and taught you to feed it power. Julian's hand trembled once around the gun. Sarah stepped forward. Dante, stop! He glanced at her. You were the easiest piece. So hungry to be loved by anyone who did not call you a ghost. Luca Moretti entered behind him, gun in hand, face cold. Enough talking. Kill the girl and take Sarah upstairs. Julian's gaze flicked to Luca, and that was when Sarah moved. Not loudly, not like a fighter in a movie. She simply picked up a heavy glass planter from the greenhouse table and smashed it into Luca Moretti's wrist. The gun fell. Sarah kicked it away with a sob that sounded like 20 years leaving her body at once. Chaos exploded. Julian fired at Silas's shoulder, not a killing shot because Alara was too close. Silas roared and shoved Alara forward. She hit the ground hard, breath gone. Dante drew a small pistol from inside his jacket and aimed at her before Julian could turn. Julian threw himself between them. The shot cracked through the greenhouse. Julian jerked back. Alara screamed his name before she knew she was going to. He dropped to one knee, blood spreading across his side, dark against his black shirt. Dante stared, almost fascinated. Still protecting the wrong person, Alara saw red. Not poetic red, not romantic red. Real, furious, ugly red. She grabbed the fallen tray from the floor and swung it into Dante's knee with all the strength she had left. He stumbled. She rose, shaking, and hit him again across the wrist. The pistol clattered into the soil beneath an orange tree. This desert girl, she snapped, breathless, has had a very long night. Silas tried to rise. Marcus hit him from the side and drove him into the glass wall hard enough to crack it. Julian's men surged forward. Moretti's men hesitated when they saw Luca on the floor and Sarah standing over his gun with both hands wrapped around it. Sarah pointed the weapon at Dante. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. Say her name. Dante, on the ground, looked up at her. For the first time, he looked old. Sarah stepped closer. My mother. Say her name. Dante smiled through pain. Marina was always weak. Sarah's face changed. No, she survived you. Julian pressed one hand to his bleeding side and tried to stand. Alara rushed to him, putting herself under his arm without asking permission, because this seemed like a good time to ignore boundaries for medical reasons. He leaned on her for 1 second, just one, and she felt the impossible weight of him. Not his body, his grief, his rage, his control finally cracking open into something human. Dante looked between them and laughed softly. This is what defeats me? My ruined niece? My sentimental nephew? And a baker? Alara glared at him. Caterer. And yes, sirens sounded in the not police, Alara realized. Julian's private security. Maybe police, too. Maybe every consequence in Atlantic City had decided to arrive at once. Julian looked at Dante. You lose. Dante's smile returned, faint and poisonous. You will not kill me in front of her. Julian's eyes moved to Alara, then to Sarah, then back to the man who had shaped his life from ash. No, Julian said quietly. I will let you live long enough to watch every lie become public. Dante's face shifted. There it was. Fear, not of death, of exposure. Men like Dante did not fear graves as much as witnesses. Sarah lowered the gun. And you will never touch our family again. Marcus took Dante. Julian's men took Silas. Luca Moretti, pale and furious, was dragged from the greenhouse by his own guards. Once they understood the deal was dead, and the vain war they had feared was already standing in the room with blood on his shirt and Sarah at his side. The Moretti alliance collapsed, not in a grand speech, but in whispers, lowered weapons, shifting loyalties, and men deciding Dante Vane was no longer worth dying for. Julian should have gone to a hospital immediately. He refused with predictable stupidity until Alara threatened to sit on him, which seemed to surprise 3 armed men and offended Julian more than the bullet wound. Sarah laughed through tears, and that was what finally broke him. Not the pain, not the blood. His sister laughing. He looked at her as if she had handed him back a sound from childhood. At the Blackfinch Medical Suite, Marina saw Sarah for the first time in 20 years. Alara stood outside the room because she had no right to be inside that much healing. She sat on a bench in the hallway with dried blood on her sleeve, soil on her shoes, and a forming along her arm where Silas had grabbed her. Julian emerged 20 minutes later, bandaged, pale, and deeply irritated by medical advice. He found her staring at a vending machine. "You should be examined," he said. "So should you, Bullet Prince. That is not one of your better names. I am injured and emotionally overcooked. My nickname quality may vary." He sat beside her carefully, one hand pressed to his side. For a while, neither spoke. Behind the closed door, someone cried softly. Maybe Marina, maybe Sarah, maybe both. Julian looked down at his hands. "You were right." Alara blinked. "I need context, because I say many wise things. If I had gone in blind, Dante would have used me again." "Yes, you saved Sarah. We saved Sarah." He looked at her. "Do not make yourself smaller for my comfort." The words struck too close. Alara looked away. "I'm not." "You are." "I am very literally not small." His gaze dropped over her for one quiet second. Not with hunger first, though there was something there that made her skin warm, with admiration, with attention, with a kind of care that did not feel like correction. "No," he said. "You are not." Her throat tightened. "Julian, I know. You do not know what I was going to say. You were going to tell me not to say something intense while bleeding." She stared. "That is deeply annoying. I notice things too." She laughed, tired and soft. He watched the sound as if it mattered. Then his expression turned serious. "After tonight, you owe me nothing." Alara's smile faded. "I will repair your apartment," he said. "Replace what was destroyed. Protect your roommate until there is no threat. Fund your business if you allow it. Or loan the money properly with terms you write yourself. But none of that buys your time. None of it buys your forgiveness. None of it buys you." Alara went very still. Julian's voice lowered. "I do not want to become another man who calls control protection." She looked at him for a long moment, at this dangerous, wounded man trying to learn gentleness, like a language he had not been allowed to speak. Then she reached over and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. "Good," she said, "because I am expensive in ways money cannot solve." His eyes softened. "I am learning that. Dante Vane's empire did not fall in one night. No real empire did. But by New Year's, the journal had reached enough hands to make silence impossible. Accounts were frozen. Men turned on one another. Old murders found new witnesses. The priest who had lied about the funeral suddenly remembered documents. The doctor who had signed Marina's false records began speaking before he could be made to stop. Dante survived, just as Julian promised, long enough to watch his name become poison in every room where he had once been welcomed. Luca Moretti was pushed out by his own family before spring. Sarah filed for annulment under a name she chose herself. Alara's apartment was repaired, then repaired again because Julian's first version included security glass, a reinforced door, and kitchen counters so expensive she refused to chop onions on them. Sugarlark received a contract with the Black Finch, but only after Alara wrote the terms, raised her prices, and made Julian sign like any other client. He did, without complaint. Then he ordered lemon cookies every Friday and pretended they were for casino guests. They did not fall into love quickly after that. They had already done the dangerous part quickly. The love itself took quieter roads. Morning coffee in the casino kitchen after Alara's deliveries, phone calls that began about invoices and ended with Julian asking what she ate that day, then being told not to manage her sandwich schedule. Sarah visiting the bakery and learning to frost cupcakes badly but happily. Marina sitting near the window with tea, watching her children speak to each other like people building a bridge from both sides. Julian standing in Alara's tiny kitchen while she tested recipes, looking too elegant for the flower on his sleeve and too calm for a man who had once terrified a city. He still had enemies. Men like Julian did not become safe because one secret ended, but he changed. Not softly, not completely. He was still Julian Vane, He still spoke in low tones that made dangerous men reconsider their life choices. He still ran Atlantic City with a hand steady enough to frighten people who mistook mercy for weakness. But the black finch changed around him. The private dining room did not stay locked on Christmas Eve. The empty chair was no longer empty. Sometimes Sarah sat there, sometimes Marina, sometimes Ilara, eating dessert before dinner, while Julian pretended not to notice and always noticed. 1 year later, the black finch opened its doors for Christmas, as if the building had finally remembered how to breathe. The casino was still grand, still glittering, still dangerous in the polished way beautiful places could be dangerous. But the cold was gone from it. Children from Sarah's new foundation filled the lower ballroom with laughter. Women from shelters and care homes sat at tables with gift boxes, legal advocates, doctors, and people who had come not to pose for cameras, but to help. Sarah Vane moved through the room in a green dress, no longer hollow-eyed, no longer standing beside a man who owned her silence. Marina watched from a velvet chair near the tree, silver hair pinned back, a lemon cookie hidden in her napkin, like old habits had survived the fire too. Ilara arrived late because 140 cream puffs had opinions about humidity. She stepped into the black finch, wearing a deep red dress that hugged her soft body, like it had been made by someone who understood that confidence did not require shrinking. Her curls fell over one shoulder. Her lipstick was dark. Powdered sugar marked one wrist, because some things were destiny. The room turned when she entered, not because she was the thinnest woman there, or the quietest, or the easiest to ignore. They turned because she looked happy inside her own skin, and that kind of beauty did not ask permission. Julian saw her from across the ballroom. For 1 second, the architect of Atlantic City forgot the conversation happening in front of him. Sarah noticed and smiled into her glass, subtle. Julian did not look away from Ilara. I have never claimed that. Ilara crossed the room toward him, accepting greetings, dodging children, and handing a cookie to Marina before stopping in front of Julian. His black suit was perfect. Of course it was. His face was calm. Of course it was. But his eyes gave him away now, at least to her. You look nervous, she said. I am not nervous. You look like you're about to negotiate with a cake. I have negotiated with worse. Do not insult cake in my presence. His mouth curved. A real smile now. Still rare. Still devastating. Sarah tapped a spoon gently against her glass. The ballroom quieted. Ilara turned, confused, as the light softened. Julian took her hand. Oh no, Ilara whispered. Julian's brow lifted. Oh no. If this is public, I need you to know I am emotionally armed. I would expect nothing less. He led her not to the center of the ballroom, but to the private dining room above it. The doors were open. Inside, the long table had been set for family. Marina's tea waited near one chair, Sarah's lemon cookies near another. At the far end, where the empty chair had once waited like a wound, there was a small plate of cannoli and a velvet box. Ilara stopped breathing. Julian turned to her. For once, he did not look like a man hiding behind control. He looked scared, and he let her see it. Last Christmas Eve, he said. You walked into this room by accident. I was misdirected. You covered me in powdered sugar. You looked festive. You brought me the truth wrapped in a thrift store coat. You gave me back my mother, my sister, my name, maybe. But more than that, you stood beside me when you had every reason to run. Ilara's eyes burned. Julian, I am not asking because you saved me, he said softly. I am asking because you argue with me, laugh at me, correct me, feed me, refuse to be bought, and make every room I enter feel less like a place I have to survive. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring engraved with a tiny lark, simple, beautiful, bright as a promise that had survived smoke. Julian lowered himself to one knee with careful dignity, because the bullet scar still hated cold weather, and Ilara would absolutely scold him later for kneeling too fast. Ilara Vance, he said, voice low and unsteady in the best possible way. Will you choose me? Not marry me first, not belong to me, not become mine. Will you choose me? That was why she cried. Then she laughed while crying because she was still herself, and he deserved the full experience. You are so lucky, she said, wiping her cheek, that I have terrible impulse control and buy suspicious thrift store coats. Julian's smile broke through completely. The luckiest man in Atlantic City. Yes, she whispered. I choose you. He slid the ring onto her finger. Downstairs, someone cheered too early because Marcus had apparently failed at subtle security placement. Sarah laughed. Marina cried. Julian stood and kissed Ilara softly, carefully, in the open doorway of the room that had once held only grief. 1 year earlier, he had sat alone with cold tea and an empty chair, believing love was something the fire had eaten. 1 year earlier, Ilara had walked in with pastries, sarcasm, and a locket that should not have existed. The truth had come wrapped like a Christmas gift, but not gently. It had come with gunfire, broken locks, old journals, stolen names, and snow falling over a city built on secrets. It had come with powdered sugar on a black suit, and a woman brave enough to stand beside the most dangerous man in Atlantic City without letting him become another cage. Now Sarah was free. Marina was home. Dante was defeated. The Black Finch was full of light, and Julian Vane, who had once ruled through fear because fear was all grief had left him, stood with Ilara's hand in his and understood at last that power could protect a door, but love was what opened it. Outside, snow covered the boardwalk in white. Inside, Ilara leaned against Julian and looked at the ring on her finger, the tiny lark shining beneath the warm lights. You know, she said, technically this all started because you people cannot label elevators correctly. Julian kissed her temple. I will never fix that elevator. That is deeply irresponsible. It brought you to me, Ilara smiled, soft and bright and wicked at the edges. Fine. But if I end up in another mafia dining room with dessert and a cursed heirloom, I'm charging double. Julian laughed then, fully, warmly, in a room where everyone heard it. And this time, no one was surprised.